Hi guys, it's Laura. Thanks for watching and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of my 3-part tutorial for a fairy house lantern, and today I will show you how to make the roof. So if that's something you're interested in, then please keep watching. Now we are going to start working on the roof. So I have here a little piece of the modeling clay that I flattened, and I'm gonna wet it lightly with my fingers and I'm gonna push it on the cardboard layer, and I'm just gonna push it in place, and just like I did with the modeling clay on the mason jar, I'm gonna flatten it, and I'll keep adding modeling clay until the entire roof is going to be covered. Now, before we'll continue, I am going to put the roof on the house, and I'm gonna smoothen the places where I touched it with my fingers again. I'll be very careful not to destroy anything on the house. I actually waited until the next day until the house was at least somewhat dry, because I find it easier to handle, but you could of course continue right away, right after you've finished working on the mason jar. So now this is smooth, and I will start creating the little leaves that we are going to layer on the roof. I have here this cookie cutter that is going to help me with my work. It's gonna make it a little bit easier and faster, and I'm just gonna use one of these tools to make the leaves also, like the surface of the leaves, structured. But if you don't have a cookie cutter like that, it doesn't matter. You can simply cut any shape of a leaf out that you like and use that instead. But it is of course a little bit easier if you just simply, cut it out with a pre-shaped frame. So here we have the first leaf, so I'm gonna dip my finger into water again, and I'm just gonna layer them like so. I'm gonna make sure that they don't go too much over the edge, and once I put them on, I will make sure that I work them in nicely, because when I made the prototype, I simply only pushed the leaves on the roof and didn't work them in properly, and when the modeling clay was drying, it always shrinks just a little bit and they then fell off. And I had to remake the leaves on the roof a little bit differently, and that's why I thought I have to tell you that. So now I'm just gonna grab one of the tools and I'm gonna make a little structure here like so, and our first leaf is done. And this is how I'm gonna continue until the entire roof is going to be covered in leaves. And I'm gonna make multiple layers. I think I'm gonna make like at least 3 layers, and I'm gonna take the bottom of the leaves and lightly like turn it, not necessarily upwards, but at least like pointing a little bit, round it up. Let me repeat that. So I have here another leaf. So again, I'm just gonna dip my finger in water and wet the leaf from the back side. Then I'm gonna turn it. I'm gonna place it next to the first leaf, and I'm going to work it in nicely, meaning I'm gonna be pushing this section of the clay nicely in the roof. Always dip my finger in water again and make a nice transition. And then I'm gonna put my finger underneath the end. I'm gonna go slightly over with this tool. You could use simply a dining knife instead of that. And I'm gonna make these little ridges that it looks a little bit structured. And then I'm gonna turn the leaf slightly upwards, and so on. Regarding the thickness, something between 1 and 2 millimeters will do. little tip. When you work the leaves in, sometimes when you dipped your fingers into the water and when you worked it in, the leaves will be a little bit, I wouldn't say too wet, but wetter than usual. And when you try to turn them upwards, they will always fall back. In that case, just wait a few minutes until they dry a little bit, and then you will be able to turn them upwards and they will also stay in place. Just give it a few minutes and always come back and see how it is. And also with this leaf, I made the layer a little bit too thin, and that's really hard to turn it upwards because it always falls back flat. So that's definitely a section where I should have used a little bit thicker layer. So it has to be definitely at least 1 millimeter, ideally 1.5 to, let's see, it's even breaking away. I think I'm just gonna redo this one. It was just too thin. So 1.5 to 2 millimeters is probably a little bit better because it's gonna be more stable. And also if it's something that you will need to transport, probably also going to end up being safer so that your work wouldn't break while transported. So let me redo this leaf. So here we have the layer. So it's a bit more than 1 millimeter. And just like before, let's make the surface wet and also the back of the leaf. Work it in nicely. And I'm also gonna smoothen the surface. And since now it's a little bit wetter, I'm just gonna wait a few minutes until I start carving in the structure of the leaf and until I will try to turn it upwards. So I just finished the first row of the leaves on our roof. So theoretically you could leave it like that. So instead of adding more leaves on the top, you could just basically carve something in like so and make it a little bit structured, and that would work too. So you could, like, if you're on a budget and you don't want to use too much of the material, or if you simply don't feel like adding more leaves, that would be pretty as well. I decided to add at least one more row, so that's what we're gonna do. So I'm basically gonna do the same. I'm just gonna cut out a couple of leaves, then I'm gonna wet the surface and make sure that the back of the leaves is also wet, and I'm just gonna work them in. There we go. So I am done with the second row of the leaves, and I have decided to leave it like that because I like the way it looks. So I simply carved the work up till the top of the roof. I think this is better in terms of drying, because if I would have added an additional row of the leaves, it would end up being even thicker and then it would need even longer to dry. But from my experience with the prototype, this needs to dry at least 3 days now, because there's the cardboard beneath it, then we have one layer that covered the cardboard, and now we have 2 layers of the leaves. So again, you just have to give this time to be sure that your work is dried completely. So here's what our little house looks like so far. I put the little house here on the shelf that's behind me, and I will let it sit there because this is far enough from the radiator and it's a really safe place where I know I can't accidentally throw it down. I have to say I find it easier to handle the work when I made the bottom first and let it dry overnight, and then I made the roof, because that way I could simply grab it carefully and place it back on the shelf. Another option would be, if you have 2 mason jars, that have the same size of the lid. Simply make the bottom and then place the roof on an empty mason jar that you didn't use and make the roof on a spare mason jar, and that way again you can handle it easier. So these are the two options you have. So if you want to finish your work in one day, definitely have a second mason jar ready that's gonna serve you as a stand for the roof. That way you don't have to worry about handling the bottom section. So that's it for this part. If you missed the first part where I showed how to make the main section of the house, I will link the video down below, and stay tuned for the final video in which I will cover the painting. So thank you all so much for watching. I love you guys so much and see you soon. Bye!